Welcome back. You've arrived at a place where the past breathes gently, where time has folded itself into quiet corridors, and where memories linger like the fading scent of rose water on velvet. Tonight, we drift toward France, to a place both splendid and solemn, a place built on spectacle and silence, on golden light and heavy shadow. We are going to Versailles, but not the Versailles of textbooks and tours, not just the mirrored halls, or the grand fountains blooming in endless symmetry. Tonight, we slip behind the walls, into forgotten passages, into a different kind of mirror, because in this palace of perfection, not everything was meant to be seen, and some things were never meant to be heard. Imagine yourself walking softly through a palace before dawn. The stone beneath your feet is cool, the light still dim. Your steps echo gently beneath high-painted ceilings. You pass towering doors framed in gold leaf. Paintings look down with still, unreadable eyes. The scent in the air is a strange mixture. Wax, perfume, something older. You are alone, or so you think. But there is always someone listening. Versailles is vast, over 2,000 rooms. And though thousands lived, worked, and wandered through its halls, there were rooms meant for no one. Rooms between rooms. Closets that weren't closets. Mirrors that didn't just reflect. And one such mirror, historians believe, once stood at the end of a narrow hallway near the Queen's apartments. Ordinary at first glance. Delicate, oval. It hung above a low table where flowers were left to wither. But it wasn't quite level. And it never reflected the light correctly, because behind it was a door. The maids whispered of it, that on certain mornings, they would find the flowers scattered on the floor, the mirror tilted open, just slightly, never enough to see through, just enough to notice. One chambermaid, writing many years later, recalled the feeling of passing that mirror on her early rounds. A coldness, not of air, but of something held back, she said. It was not that something waited there, it was that something had already left. Behind that mirror, some claimed, was a hidden retreat for a member of the royal family, or a place of punishment, where servants were confined for disobedience. Others said it was used for watching, not openly, not cruelly, just watching. And still others insisted that sometimes, when all was quiet, you could hear soft weeping behind the glass. Of course, no architectural record confirms this room, no blueprint, no key. But Versailles is built not only on marble and wealth, it is built on secrets, layered like paint. And some secrets, once glimpsed, refuse to be forgotten. Let us drift now, not just through space, but through identity, through powdered rooms and lace silhouette, to the story of a woman not found in the official portraits, and yet one who left a soft trace behind the brocade and brooches. She arrived at Versailles not by carriage, but quietly, through a back gate, a companion to someone of rank, a laddie in waiting, perhaps, or something closer. Her name is uncertain. Records from that wing were sparse, and some were later removed altogether, but her presence was noted. A woman of stillness, always veiled, always distant, even in a room full of mirrors. She wore gloves even in summer, and a delicate mask, not of the masquerade kind, but of porcelain, simple, pale, unadorned. Some said she had a condition, others whispered of disfigurement, from an accident, or perhaps from birth. But those who worked near the Queen's wing told a different story, that the mask wasn't for hiding, it was for protection, not from disease, but from being recognized. There were rumors she had once been part of the court, once smiled at the king, once danced under until one night, she vanished. And when she returned years later, she wore the mask, and never took it off again. She lived quietly, housed in a small chamber near the northeast corner of the palace. It had no exterior windows, just a small skylight, now long since sealed. Each morning, her tray was left outside the door. By evening, it would be returned, food untouched, but the silver rearranged in precise symmetrical pattern. Once a week, her linen was collected, always neatly folded, and always carrying the faint scent of violets. Some say she had no voice. Others claimed they heard her singing, softly, in a forgotten dialect, a lullaby in Occitan, a language long faded from the court. She did not die there. At least, not officially. One day, the door was found open, her room empty, her mask left behind, resting on the pillar. But in the years since, several housekeepers have reported seeing her in the Hall of Mirrors, not her reflection. Her, standing still, alone, in the distance. as though she were waiting for someone to notice, to remember. And sometimes, they say, a faint outline of a mask appears in photographs, always where no one stood. Just a soft curve of porcelain, barely there, but unmistakable, as though she never really left, as though the palace still sees her, even if history does not. Now, let us step gently into the music. The Salon de, the Hall of Mirrors, the Queen's Opera. Versailles was built not only for rule, but for display. 4 velvet shoes on polished floors, 4 masked glances, whispered alliances, a music that softened even the sharpest truths. The grandest room of all, perhaps, was the Hall of Mars, a ballroom unlike any other. Tall columns, gilded walls, crystal chandeliers catching candlelight like stars held indoors. This was where the court moved like clockwork, where gowns rustled like leaves, where war and peace were discussed in the space between dances. But even here, the floor remembers. There's a pattern in the wood familiar to restorers, but often overlooked by tourists. A darker plank, slightly warped, just to the right of the main chandelier. Hardly noticeable, unless you know what to look for. And if you stood there, quietly, you might feel the faintest dip beneath your foot. Not enough to trip, just enough to shift your balance. Local legend says this is where the blood was cleaned. Not spilled in battle, not on a dueling ground, but here, in the ballroom, at a masked celebration in the spring of 1768. The records say it was a minor incident, a scuffle between noblemen, no charges. Just a footnote. Music paused, floor attended, but a handwritten note, discovered behind a wall during later renovations, tells a quieter version. It describes a woman in green velvet, a sudden cry, not loud, but sharp, and a red shape blooming across the polished floor, quickly absorbed by her skirt. She was taken out through the servant passage. No announcement made. The musicians resumed playing within minutes. That corner of the room, the note says, was then mopped. Not once, but 13 times. And still, it left a mark. Not visible, but sensed. The floor, they wrote, grew reluctant to shine in that spot. And so today, restorers treat it differently, gently, as if it remembers. There are those who believe Versailles holds on to what it cannot name. Not out of malice, but out of memory. That every scrape, every whisper, every lost step, becomes a part of the building. And so the ballroom stands, still gleaming, still grand. But some nights, when it is empty, when the doors are closed and no music plays, a single heel is heard. Just one, crossing from the far wall to the darker plank and stopping, as though someone, somewhere, is still waiting for the next note to begin. And now, let us return to the heart of the palace, not to the throne room, not to the chapel, but to a smaller space. One rarely mentioned in guidebooks, a sitting room, tucked just behind the Queen's private apartments. The walls were once lilac, or a faded blue, painted with pastoral scenes, shepherds with ribbons in their hats, and women who smiled without ever looking directly at you. This was a place meant for retreat, for 4 letters. It was where the Queen would be unseen, and yet somehow more observed than ever. The Queen in question, perhaps Marie Antoinette, though some accounts are unclear, was known for her desire to escape, not through exile or rebellion, but through pretend, through costume, through simplicity made elaborate. And it is here that another tale begins. A guest to Versailles, writing in the autumn of 1783, described an encounter unlike any other. He had been led unintentionally, he believed, into this small salon. The doors had been left open. The hall outside was silent. Inside, he saw a woman seated by the fireplace, alone. Still, her dress was rich but outdated, her hair powdered, though the fashion had begun to shift, and her face, he could not describe it. He wrote, it was not that her face was obscured, it was that it refused to resolve itself. I looked once, then twice, and felt no closer to understanding what I had seen. He stepped back. The door closed softly behind him. When he asked later who she was, the servants grew still. Which room? They asked. And when he told them, one maid crossed herself. Another whispered, that door hasn't opened in years. Some believe this was a vision. Others say it was simply memory of the Queen, exhausted by a performance, momentarily forgetting to wear the mask of power. But the phrase remained, passed from maid to maid, courtier to courtier, the Queen with no face. And over time, she took on her own myth. Not cruel, not benevolent, just watching. A reminder that Versailles was never only for the living, that in a place built to reflect, so many mirrors, so many polished surfaces, there would always be something that refused to be seen. They say if you walk the Queen's corridor at night and catch a glimpse of your reflection in the wrong glass, you may see someone behind you, wearing a gown that no longer exists, sitting where no chair has stood for centuries, her hands folded, her gaze soft, her face unfinished. And if you turn around, there is nothing there, only a coolness in the air, and a sense that someone is remembering you. And now, the echoes begin to fade. The halls grow quiet once more, the chandeliers dim, the music slows, and Versailles exhales, as it has done, night after night, for centuries. What remains are only impressions. The slight creak of a hidden door, the outline of a mask glimpsed through candlelight, a darker floorboard no one steps on anymore. But perhaps that is all history ever truly leaves behind. Not answers, but layers of presence, of pattern, of stories tucked like folded letters behind the walls. You have walked alongside queens and chambermaids, strangers and shadows, and yet they have all drifted, now, back into silence, back into the hush of gilt ceilings and painted faces. Versailles still stands, its mirrors still shimmer, but the palace has long since stopped reflecting what we think we know. Now, it reflects memory, repetition, the soft breath of things unsaid. So allow yourself to settle now. Feel the rhythm of your own breath, steady as footsteps down a marble corridor. The stillness of a room no longer watched. The comfort of not needing to see what waits behind the mirror. Sleep, if you'd like. The house waits without rushing. It always has. Good night.